Thanks for taking the time after setting up your Christmas lights to come in and listen, horror hounds and killer kittens, to this crazy episode. I hope you set out some newspapers and are wearing your raincoat, because this is going to be a splatter fest. My name is Rob Pasercha.
I'm Devin Shepard.
And I'm David B. Jacobs.
And we are Cadaver Dogs. So before we get started, I got to plug our social media account. We are Cadaver Dogs Pod. So please, everyone, share with your friends. Go check us out. Comment on our videos, and maybe we'll talk about some of the movies that you guys like the most. We're very active, and, we're pretty cool people. I like to think so.
Well, I am.
Yeah. David had an amazing Halloween.
Fuck yeah.
By the way, Decky's outfit was scary as hell.
Oh my God. Rob's wife dressed up as the Grudge. And, right? It was the Grudge?
It was supposed to be the Grudge, and then Rob just started telling everyone it was the Ring.
She looked more like the Ring girl to me, but yeah.
But it matched your outfit because you were the little boy.
I was the little boy from the Grudge.
Yeah.
Which just looked like a half-assed Halloween costume. It didn't really look like much.
Kind of a little bit.
It looks like Miguel from Coco.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right. So our first film is slightly a blast from the past, not too long ago, considering where we usually go in this podcast. And telling us about it is Devin Shepard.
His name is Patrick Bateman. He's 27 years old. He believes in taking care of himself and a balanced diet and a rigorous exercise routine. He can do 1,000 crunches now. There's an idea of Patrick Bateman, some kind of abstraction, but there is no real Patrick, only an entity, something illusory. And though you can shake his hand and feel flesh gripping yours, he simply is. He simply is a yuppie. In the 1980s, Patrick Bateman is the ideal American man. He's rich, fit, handsome, works on Wall Street, dates the perfect woman, has sex with the perfect mistress, and murders stray cats by putting them into the ATM machines. American Psycho is a look at the life of Patrick as he struggles to keep his rage and desire for murder in check. Spoiler alert, he doesn't, and ends up murdering many women, sex workers, a homeless man, friends, and work enemies, all while trying to remain the perfect specimen. This is American Psycho, directed by Mary Harron.
I'm super excited to talk about the Reaganomics here, but first off...
Of course.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is me we're talking about. I mean, you're playing right in my strengths here.
Is this not a Cadaver Dogs episode if we don't mention Ronald Reagan?
Every episode. That honestly, that's my next year Halloween costume. Definitely. I'm going to be Ronald Reagan, yeah.
Oh, that would be good.
Ronald Reagan next year. He'll be the scariest costume ever. So... before we get into that, though, I do want to ask, this movie has a kind of ambiguous ending where it implies that what happened may not have happened. A large portion of it, or all of it even, may have been in his head. Where do you guys fall on that debate? Do you think it's real? Do you think it's all in his head? Do you think it's somewhere in between?
Oh, it's all in his head, obviously. Yeah. Actually, the director even said that she wished she made it more ambiguous. Because it was like too clear that it was all in his head. I mean, at the end, his secretary goes and finds his notebook where he was fantasizing all this stuff. And then Paul Allen is alive. He was never missing. Yeah, Paul Allen was alive at the end. He never killed Paul Allen.
Wait, did I miss that?
Yeah, his lawyer, who mistaken Patrick Bateman for someone else, was like, I just had lunch with Paul Allen. What do you mean?
Oh, but that's his lawyer saying that. We don't actually see Paul Allen.
Yeah, I mean... I feel like the idea was to make it ambiguous, and that's why that was there. But then at the end, Bateman is like even commenting on how he wishes he could do this stuff, but he doesn't actually do it. And plus the ending with the feed cat to the ATM and all this other stuff happened. That was obviously like a fever dream. That wasn't a reality.
See, I'm somewhere on the in-between. I feel like the real fever dreamy stuff, like the cat, doesn't happen until after he murders... Is it Christy that all that stuff happens? Yeah, he starts to go like really haywire. So I feel like what I read this time was that I think he killed Paul Allen, but not any of the women. And I mean, like, for a huge part of that, and I really respect Mary Harron's choice here, is because we don't ever see him actually killing the women on screen. We only see him killing the homeless man. The homeless man.
He does drop a chainsaw on a girl. We do see that.
But we don't see it happen. We see the shot of him about to drop the chainsaw, dropping the chainsaw, and then the aftercut of, like, the image of her with the chainsaw in it. But we don't see, like, it actually happen. I don't even think we really hear it happen.
Well, they don't show any of the real deaths. Like, we don't even see him kill Paul Allen. We just see this blood splattering on his face. Then we don't even see the body.
And to be fair with the chainsaw death, it should also be pointed out that the physics of that, like, don't make sense.
Yeah, that's fucking impossible.
What, to drop a chainsaw on somebody? What?
So to aim like that.
It wouldn't work. I also don't think that would actually cut into her the way it would, because it's a moving blade, so it would, like, push itself out. It would slash her. It might even still be lethal, but it wouldn't embed itself inside of her. I don't know.
You're right.
I don't know.
Do a Mythbusters of it.
we should do a Mythbusters.
Yeah, let's definitely try it out.
That's actually funny, because the next movie, there is a Mythbusters about a falling object. But in this one, I think we got to do the chainsaw.
So, what I think, the first time I watched this movie, I was 100% on the obviously this is all in his head train, because I agree with Mary Harron that I think that the way it's shot and written doesn't draw enough attention to the ambiguity, but having heard enough about it and watching it again, that ambiguity is all there. I mean, you're talking about the lawyer says, "Oh, I just had lunch with Paul Allen last week," but in this conversation, he doesn't even realize he's talking to Patrick Bateman. He's like, "Oh, Davis, that was you pretending to be Patrick Bateman." But that was a mistake, because Bateman's too much of a dork to do all of this. And Patrick's like, "No, I am Patrick Bateman. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And the first conversation in the movie, the very first thing that happens, is that they're all having a conversation where they're trying to figure out if that's Paul Allen sitting over there or not.
Right. Yeah. And when Paul Allen supposedly in London and the detective says, "Oh yeah, someone saw Paul Allen last week, except we realized it's not him, it's some other guy."
Yep. Yeah. This keeps happening throughout the movie. All of the yuppies mistake each other for other different yuppies. They can't tell each other apart because they're so self-centered and absorbed in their own lives that none of them really care about any of the people around them.
They're also similar. They're pretty much interchangeable. But the other thing is, like, okay, if we decide that he only killed Paul Allen and not the women, that makes sense because tenants have moved into Paul Allen's old apartment and apparently not noticed the dozen dead bodies in there.
I think he definitely killed at least some of the women. There's definitely a point of it where okay, part of it is also that I like the interpreting more of it to be real than not real, because I just think it's more interesting that way. I think it's less interesting if it's all in his head, even though, yes, parts of it, like the feed me the stray cat scene, are clearly in his head. He did not have a shootout with the police. That's in his head. But the scene in the apartment, which is, you generally read this as it's all in his head because none of the stuff that's in his apartment is there. But his conversation with the realtor in there is that she understands. She sees him and she's like, "Oh, you should leave now." Like, she does not react the way that she would if there's some weird person just walking around the apartment, where she'd be like, "Who the fuck are you?" She just looks at him. She's like, "You're responsible for all that stuff I cleaned up. You should just leave."
I don't know. I think it's perfect acting, because I read it. I rewatched that scene a couple times, and I was trying to figure out, okay, which one are they leaning here? And I think they do a really good job of, like, being really ambiguous with, okay, she could just be a realtor that's freaked out by this dude, or she could be someone on the inside.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was so good. My biggest thing with why I think he killed Paul Allen, though, Paul Allen was the only one that he had a motive to kill, even though it was a ridiculous motive. Everything else from there on out was just whatever he was feeling. But Paul Allen was really, like, he wanted to kill Paul Allen.
Yeah, well, yeah, he hated Paul Allen for his business cards and getting into Darcia. I'm going to call it Darcia every time. Even in my notes, I wrote it wrong. Darcia.
And I understand that's also a change from the book, that in the book he didn't really have a motive to kill Paul Owen in the book. But Mary Harron added that into the business card scene, which is so fucking funny.
Oh my god, that scene. Okay, so what I'm still trying to figure out too is, so Patrick Bateman is very, very adamant about fitting in. He wants to fit in, he wants to be normal, but he also wants to be the best. I'm interested in hearing your guys' thought about that. Is like, does his strive to be the best still fit in with his strive to just being normal?
Well, I think it talks to the whole paradox of 80s excess and like materialism, because the idea is that you're supposed to be the best, you're the center of all the attention, you're supposed to accumulate all this wealth, but we also, in us as humans, have this need for socialization. So it's a bunch of like-minded, self-centered egomaniacs all trying to fit in with one another. So it's kind of an impossibility, and that's why these ideas about materialism are kind of toxic. And I think that's one of the central ideas of the film, is that you're going to force yourself to hate humanity if you try to create this image of yourself where you're cutthroat and it's dog eat dog, but at the same time you need to fit in with other people. So it's very interesting when he's talking to Reese Witherspoon in the back of the car, and he's trying to listen to his headphones, and he's like ignoring her, but he needs to be with her, and he's like, I'm trying to fit in while I'm ignoring the person next to me. And I think a lot of the movie is about this like push-pull of like two magnets that can't touch each other. You know, it's supposed to be opposite poles, but there's always that pressure. So he'll never truly fit in as long as he maintains this persona within this society.
Right, because he's not being himself. He's being a fake person. And how can you fit in with people when you're not a person? Yes. Like he says in the very beginning, he's an entity.
Right, but even if his own self is an egomaniac and a narcissist, those kinds of people who are trying to get over on everyone else, it's impossible for them to empathize with one another. So even if you're that type of person, you are barred from the empathy that you crave.
Exactly. And because of that, I think that fitting in and being better than everyone else are kind of the same thing in the world that he's in. That he is in this high society world where everyone is striving to be better than everyone else. And everything is just like that business card scene where it's just a dick measuring contest to see who can be higher class, more privileged, get more things out of life. It's all about just one-upping each other.
Right.
That is fitting in.
But I do really like what you were saying, Rob, about the humanistic part, because I think something that stood out to me this time around, because I knew we were going to talk about, you know, if everything was in his head, he several times throughout the movie tells people what he's feeling, or that, you know, he wants to kill them, or that he's like having maniacal thoughts and murderous thoughts. And it's so interesting to look at that as either this is all in his head and he's not actually saying that, or he is actually saying that and everyone's just ignoring it because no one can look at the humanistic qualities and everyone is just an object, like you were saying, Rob.
Yeah, there's at least two scenes that I can think of off the top of my head where he explicitly conveys the type of person he is. And it's when he's yelling, I'm into murders and executions instead of mergers and
acquisitions.
Mergers and acquisitions, yeah, which is really funny. And that one, like, you know, there's plausible deniability because the music's super loud and they're talking about mergers and acquisitions. So
that is what they work in, actually.
Right. And but no one knows anything about their actual business. They all just talk about personas.
And, right, and like anyone's actually heard of Pierce and Pierce. Pierce and Pierce, have you heard of it? Yeah. Who knows these businesses on Wall Street?
I don't know. But there's also the part where he's talking about Ed Gein. And that's when people actually listen to him and they're like, oh, you fucking weirdo.
Oh, he also mentions Ted Bundy.
He does.
The commonality between Ed Gein and Ted Bundy is that they're both women killers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, they're both
the Ed Gein one, though, is especially interesting to me because there's a point in the movie where he's watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or he's doing punches to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's a scene of Leatherface flaunting his chainsaw around like a massive dick and dancing. But it's funny because Leatherface, famously, is at least partially based on Ed Gein.
Yeah, I've definitely done crunches to Texas Chainsaw Massacre before. Yeah, but what I was saying is that you know, this idea of fitting in, he's a weirdo, but then also societal pressures and like the conformity of all the members are to push people away whenever they try to close the gap of empathy, right? whenever they try to have any kind of like intimate relation with one another. And his strangeness, I think the movie and the book itself is trying to speak to the underlying bloodthirsty nature of capitalist society and consumerism in the 80s.
Oh, for sure.
Do you guys think that Patrick is the only character in this movie who's a killer?
Like a killer, like, hey, killer, like they use throughout the entire film, or
like, do you think he's the only one who has this secret murderous rampage going on behind closed doors?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know. Josh Lucas's character is pretty much a dickhead, and maybe he's killed somebody. Justin Theroux's character, I could see killing somebody. I mean, I don't know. How many fucking 80s yuppies actually killed somebody?
Well, Donald Trump. So the line that made me think of this, that other characters might be killers, is actually Paul Allen. He says, I'd love to tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. And the way he says it feels very similar to when Patrick is admitting his killings to others, and they just brush it off. And I'm just
interesting.
Like, I wonder if Paul Allen is also a killer. He is played by Jared Leto, which helps back that up.
And they do ask him, I mean, in that moment that you explained, David, the question is, how did you get that account? And it's, Paul Allen is always like one step ahead of everybody and has, reservations at Dorsia and has a better this and has a better that. But he's still just like everybody else. And everyone has the same job. My favorite thing is during the business card scene, they all say vice president. No one has a different role at that company. Yeah, it's fucking fantastic.
That is really...
How does Paul Allen stand out? Maybe because he danced with the devil and murdered somebody else. Maybe he murdered Davis.
I think it's an interesting fan fiction. I don't think there's any basis for it in the movie.
Oh, no.
But I like Paul Allen's a great character because he's the one that they're all jealous of. And Bateman being the most jealous of all of them. That's the guy, obviously, he wants to off. And it's really funny because they all look so much alike.
They do.
Christian Bale and Paul Allen look like fucking changeable in this movie. They have the same haircut almost exactly. They wear the same types of suits. It's so funny.
Everyone looks similar except for Lewis. Can we talk about Lewis? Lewis is the guy who is engaged to Patrick Bateman's mistress.
Oh, yeah,
and
okay.
Who is very obviously in love with Patrick Bateman.
And by obviously, you mean he professes his love for Patrick Bateman during the movie.
Yes. And they do a good job of setting it up. I think he touches him a lot throughout the film. And like, there's a part during I think it's at the end of the business card scene where he goes, "Are you okay, Patrick?" And like looks so sad. And it's just like, it's the only time in the whole film that someone asks if the other person's okay, and the only time someone else cares about another person's feelings.
I feel like this movie has a really weird relationship with homosexuality. I mean, they bring it up a few times, and I mean, it is set in the 80s, which is an extremely homophobic era. And obviously they're all into Reaganomics, and Reagan is not a great icon for the LGBTQ community. But also, like, the scene with Lewis feels very early 2000s in the way that it's like, oh, there's this character who's been secretly gay all along, and now he's going to profess his love for the main character. Like, I feel like that happens in every early 2000s movie. And it doesn't actually say anything about that. I'm not sure what it's trying to say.
So I'm curious if you guys read Patrick Bateman as closeted, and I have reasons why I do. Okay. Rob, did you?
I mean, he's like narcissistic, and I feel like he's almost more sexually attracted to himself than other people. And there's just like, there's so much like homoeroticism in it. Like when he's having the threesome and he's looking at himself in the mirror. So I think that you're more likely to say that he's self-sexually motivated than like homosexually motivated.
That's very fair.
He also when he kills men, there's no sexual component to it. It's all pure jealousy and blood rage. So I don't read him as closeted at all. I don't really see. Maybe I missed something.
He does say that when he kills Paul Allen, he does say that he enjoyed it. I think you can actually read that as somewhat sexual.
I mean, it's a release, yeah.
Right. And it's very interesting, I guess usually when we look at things from the early 2000s, we don't talk about the other spectrum of queerness. But I think you're totally right, Rob, that it doesn't necessarily mean that he's gay. I think it just means that he's not maybe cis straight man. Like there's something else that's different. And that's definitely how I read him. One reason, so Bret Easton Ellis, who wrote the original novel, and we can talk about how much this is different from the original book and how much Bret Easton Ellis actually hates this movie. But something that Ellis talked about is how he sort of based Patrick on his experiences in the 80s, and he is a gay man, and he was talking about how much he doesn't fit in. And I think that shows a lot in Patrick Bateman's characters, that even though he's trying really hard to fit in, he still doesn't quite. But maybe that's because we see more of his true self through his voiceover, etc. And then actually, I do want to go back to what I was saying earlier. Things don't get really fantastical and crazy. It's not after he kills Christy. It's after Lewis approaches him in the bathroom that things start to really go haywire. And I was like, oh, that's the pivotal point where Patrick notices something that's different and like really pushes him into this rage, and really starts to like lose his mind a little bit.
Right. So let me go into and say how you guys are kind of winning me over on this argument a little bit and kind of like fuel it. I'm not sure if I'm 100% with you now, but if we go back to a previous movie, which we talked about, The Screwfly Solution, which I love and David hates, there's this idea of like sexual confusion between like sexual violence and sexuality. And if Patrick Bateman is seen as his character trying to imitate others, then perhaps he's taking on the persona of like masculine aggression rather than the sexual persona, which like a straight heterosexual man should healthily be using when engaging with women. And that's why his interactions with women are so self-centered and so violently motivated. It's because he's not sexually aroused in the traditional way. He's just imitating the aggressive violence that he sees in hypermasculinity, which this whole movie's about. So I think that might be a really nuanced reading of the movie.
I think it's also worth noting that he does not kill Lewis, who he was about to kill, but Lewis coming onto him freaks him out so much that he doesn't kill. The thing that first ticked my brain into seeing this reading, though, was actually that when he's talking to Kimball, the detective, Willem Dafoe's character, about Paul Allen, he says, I think he was probably a closet homosexual who did a lot of cocaine. And then when, like, the very next scene after this, Patrick Bateman goes and uses Paul's apartment and pretends to be Paul Allen, uses his name, takes on his identity.
That's so interesting. And they also go to this club and do a lot of coke in it, and the club looks very gay.
Does it?
It looks like a gay club.
Here's my problem with this reading, is that I kind of feel like this reading's really homophobic. Not like having the reading is, but like it implies that the movie is. Because to me, what this is saying is that Patrick's repression of his homosexuality is leading him to killing people and lashing out and murdering. And that's obviously not how that works.
But isn't that more a commentary on society that is causing us to not come out and not be our true selves? That it's like more blaming society for these serial killers rather than blaming homosexuality in the first place?
Yeah. And I also think that it's almost explicit that Patrick Bateman is a side effect of society. Like in the first few minutes of the movie, he's describing himself as an entity and not like a free agent actually making decisions with real autonomy or any kind of volition, right? So I don't read it as homophobic, and I think if you do read it as homophobic, it's equally as sexist, and I don't read it as either, because I think his reaction to it and the imitation of this hypermasculinity is critique on the hypermasculinity or the toxic masculinity, if you will, of the 80s and of the time and of this lifestyle, rather than glorifying it. Although, if you want to, there is kind of a problem of like hero worship in this movie. There are clothing lines based on Patrick Bateman. When I was in college, I was at a bar and there was a guy and I'm like, "You're dressed like Patrick Bateman," and he goes, "I know," and he put his gloves on, and I was like,
that's
"Oh,
what she meant by
my
that.
God."
Yeah. He wasn't a. I don't think he was a serial killer.
How funny is it when he washes his hands with his gloves are still on?
Yeah. There's just like this total disgust with homosexuality in that scene. But then if you read it as a being closeted homosexual, then it's pretty interesting, right? There's a lot of self-disgust because he obviously hates himself. I think at the end he even says he hates himself. He hates everyone else. He doesn't like anything because this materialistic identity just strips you of all human interaction, all autonomy, and it forces you to treat women in particular as objects and men as competitors. There's no friends. He has no friends. He has no one to rely on. Even when he breaks up with Reese Witherspoon, which is probably the best scene of the movie. No, there's a lot of best scenes
definitely.
in the movie. But when he says, "You're not terribly important to me," and she starts crying, which is just so funny. And that's right after she says, "Oh, shut up, Bateman. Your friends are my friends and my friends are your friends." He goes, "I've thought about that. You can have them."
Yeah, and she keeps rejecting his feelings until eventually she's like, "Oh, wait, you're serious. Like, you have feelings about this. That means it's real."
So can I ask you guys a question? And I think you can comment directly on Reese Witherspoon with this question. So we covered homosexuality, but the bigger controversy surrounding this film is whether or not it's sexist or if it's a feminist film. And I watch it as feminist.
1000%.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's feminist. I don't know if the book is, but I haven't read the book, so I can't comment on that.
Well, and this is the big controversy between Ellis and Mary Harron's version, because Ellis hates this movie because it's a dark comedy. The book is not a comedy. And I've been reading a lot of articles about this now, and what people see so much about this is that because Mary Harron and the screenwriter Genevieve Turner made this a comedy, it's more of like pointing out the flaws in male society, the toxic masculinity, and being like, you guys are fucked up. Like, look at what you're doing. Like, let's laugh at this. This is ridiculous. And Ellis didn't see it that way. And he gets really angry that it is pretty much a feminist movie.
But it's interesting because this also kind of contradicts what Rob was saying, and I kind of agree with Rob on this, that one of those articles you sent compares it to Wolf of Wall Street and Wall Street, and says how in those movies there are people who still worship Jordan Belfort and Gordon Gekko, but you can't make that mistake with Patrick Bateman. It's too obvious that people are that you're meant to be laughing at him, but people still worship him.
Yeah, and that's the issue. Is like people just like some people just don't get it. I think people just like didn't see it that way. This is my issue. I see it a lot with Mad Men. People worship Don Draper, and I'm like, at no point during that series are you supposed to like or worship Don Draper. He is not a good person.
Well, they did it with Walter White as well, though I suppose with Walter White, you were supposed to sympathize with him in the beginning, just not as it keeps going.
So I wonder, I haven't read the book, but I've heard a lot about it, and I bought it recently. I plan on reading it soon. One of the biggest differences is they took most of the graphic violence out of the movie, because the book is extremely graphic. He puts a rat inside a girl. He does like awful things.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the main one they're always talking about. I know, because my grandmother had read it, and she was yelling at me one day, "That's an awful, awful book." And I was like, "Well, I like the movie." And she's like, "You're disgusting, blah, blah, blah." I was like 10, too, which is so funny. And she told me about that.
Yeah, I heard about that in high school.
Yeah, I wonder if the message isn't similar in the book and the movie, but the author is just upset that he feels almost like you're making fun of his personal experience. And he's very close to the source material.
Yeah, that's kind of how I saw it.
Didn't Ellis also say that women can't direct movies?
He was so angry about Mary Harron's depiction of this film that he just said, I don't think women can direct movies, and like still holds to it this day, except for I think he tweeted he tweeted something that was like, no women can direct movies except maybe Sofia Coppola, except maybe so-and-so, and like
Andrea Arnold, he really likes Fish Tank.
Oh my god, but then he keeps saying, but like women don't have the sensibility that men do. I'm going to have to find this whole quote because it's awful. Yeah. It's absolutely awful.
He said that women can't have the male gaze, and you need the male gaze to direct movies, which is like really stupid. But why do you need the male gaze in movies? It doesn't make sense.
I hate him.
I think that Ellis is saying that because he's responding to decades and decades of the male gaze dominating movies, that he can't see an alternative to that. And then he says something like, "Oh well, how do you explain away like all the great directors are men?" And it's like that's because that's who was allowed to direct movies.
Well, exactly. He just doesn't get what is wrong about what he is saying. He's like, yeah, women haven't directed as many movies. You can't properly judge it. Like, oh my God, it angers me so much.
It's a comment so stupid that it's not even worth arguing against because it's just absurdly stupid of a comment.
I know.
You're right. I hate him. He's dumb. How dare he say that? Let's move the fuck on.
Yeah, and plus, it's so easy to argue against because there's just such a plethora of like good films directed by women. I mean, for one, The Hurt Locker, great. Zero Dark 30, awesome.
He does like Catherine Bigelow.
Yeah. Fucking.
Oh, right.
You got Raw. You got Titan. I mean, it's an endless list of fantastic films directed by female directors, and we should just be harder on bad movies than based on who directs them.
Yeah.
Stop making bad movies. Let more people make good movies. And if their movies suck, you should say they suck.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Let's take a break right here to hear a word from our sponsor.
Okay, pups, I'm excited to move on to our next movie, but first, I'd like to ask you once again to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Cadaver Dogs Pod. And while you're at it, if you're enjoying the show, the best way to help us grow is by tweeting about us or otherwise sharing us with your friends. Lastly, if you have a podcast or horror-related product you'd like to promote in this space right here, shoot us an email at cadaverdogspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks, pups.
Thanks for sticking around for a second film. David B. Jacobs is going to give us the rundown.
You better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. I'm gonna spoil the fuck out of this movie. Seriously, I know we always spoil movies, but this one, 2017's Better Watch Out, directed by Chris Packover, has some serious twists that are fun to uncover yourself. So Ashley is a teenage babysitter looking after a 13-year-old kid in a nice, safe suburban neighborhood. You see where this is going. The kid, Luke, is a nice, innocent little brat with a kind of weird and bordering inappropriate crush on his babysitter. Let's move past that. There's an invader outside. Could it be Luke's parents? No, I'm fucking with you. It's Luke. It's Luke himself. With the help of his friend Garrett, Luke has graduated from brat to psycho, tying Ashley to a chair as he psychologically abuses her, murders her exes, and not even in a bizarre attempt to be with her. See, he's already planned on framing Ashley's ex Jeremy for the murders, including her own. He even kills Garrett for trying to help Ashley. Seriously, this kid is scary. Just as his parents arrive home to find Luke tucked away in bed where he allegedly slept through the whole massacre, we hear those fateful words, "This one's alive." Someone's getting coal in their stocking this year.
So, David, you talked about how this has a big twist. What did you guys think about the twist? Did you see it coming? Like, did it work for you?
I didn't see it coming at all. I was like, oh my God, when he knocked her down the stairs.
Well, you better have watched out. No, I'm sorry.
I didn't see that. I went in this movie completely blind. I didn't know a single thing about it. I hadn't read anything. That made the viewing experience much, much better. It was really cool when you see Garrett from the closet view and it turns out that he's wearing an overcoat and holding a shotgun. That was really cool because then I was like, oh, this movie just turned into something else. Because I'd always felt like it wasn't really at that beat of like The Strangers or Vacancy where like someone's outside trying to get you. That kind of
well, The Stranger sucks, but
it never really reached that like pitch. And I was like, oh, this is kind of like a silly slasher movie. You know, it has this like Home Alone vibe.
Yeah, I'm very similar. This is the second time I watched it. The first time I watched it, I didn't really see the twist coming, kind of just because I didn't give the movie enough credit to have that in it. I was more looking at it as like, wow, Luke really sucks as a kid, and I kind of hate him, and I'm not supposed to hate him, but I do. And it just felt like a very generic movie, and then that twist happened, I was like, okay, I'm in. Like, what's happening? This is great.
You know, a little bit of it, before the twist happened, I was like, oh, she's dealing with a drunk 12-year-old? That's kind of a novel twist on the formula. 12-year-old. I thought that was kind of neat, and then it really went in a much more interesting direction, I think.
It really did, because I was seeing so many great reviews about this film, and I was like, okay, I guess I better watch it. And I turned it on, and I had the same thoughts as David. I was like, Okay, this is a general invader movie with a babysitter.
Mhm.
What the fuck does everyone love about it? I guess it's pretty, and it has Virginia Madsen and Patrick Warburton, so plus.
For a minute. I mean, Patrick Warburton, he's a great comedic actor. In this movie, he doesn't really do anything that's funny, but I still laugh hysterically at everything he does, because I'm just like, ha, 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 Patrick Warburton's looking at a tree. That's so funny.
I know. Oh my god. Okay, so I was reading an interview with the director, and the whole scene with the ornaments, where he and Virginia Madsen are talking about putting ornaments on the tree, and he brings out his ruby red slippers. That's improvised, and B, those are Patrick Warburton's Christmas ornaments. He got so excited that he brought to Australia all these like ornaments, and he wanted them to be in the movie.
That's amazing. Oh my god, I love Patrick Warburton so much. He's like the funniest person ever. I love him.
All right. Two quick things. I didn't realize they were in Australia until after I saw the movie and I read that they were in Australia.
I also didn't realize they were in Australia until right now when Devin said that.
Does anyone even have an Australian accent in the movie?
No.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
they
no
are
wonder.
Australian actors, though.
They are?
Yeah. At least the three main, the two kids and the lead. I guess not the lead. We can debate that.
Does the movie take place in
they're
Australia?
Australian. No, so it's in
right,
America.
okay.
It's supposed to take place in America, and what ended up happening is they were going to shoot it for like $500,000 in South Carolina. And then the director, who's actually Canadian, and I think his mother is Australian, was like, the producer approached him and was like, hey, you can do this for a lot more money in Australia if we do it in Australia. So then they upped the budget to like $3 million, I think it was, and shot in Australia with a whole new cast.
I got Funny Games vibes at one point in this movie.
Oh, so much. Yeah.
Yeah. The two kids with her tied up and crying, and them just doing awful things, and like you're like, oh, how far is this going to go? And it just, the horror keeps stacking. Gave me this idea of like Funny Games, and maybe that speaks to like this idea of privilege, where we see this kid who's well off, and it seems like he's just abusing the power he has by virtue of being his ontology, which is similar to Patrick Bateman. He knows he can get away with this thing, so he just does it for the sake of doing it. This sociopathy that's only, the opportunities presented to itself via his position in society.
He's this little brat who's never been told no.
Yeah, but I mean, it was neat because I think the actor is great. I think the kid's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, the kid who plays Luke is phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
I also like the kid who plays Garrett a lot. I thought he did very well.
Mm-hmm. All
Amazing.
the actors are great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, actually, who's not the best? Probably the one boyfriend who gets hung. He's like very generic.
Oh, how do you say his name? Montgomery. The guy from Stranger Things.
Yeah, he's from Stranger Things.
Yeah, he was apparently a real pain in the ass on set too, because he couldn't do any stunts by a contract.
Really?
Yeah, he was tied into either Stranger Things or another much bigger movie. So they're like, he cannot be hurt, and like his schedule was very strict.
It's a dangerous stunt. That's fine.
I mean, maybe it's a dangerous stunt. I don't know. But
meanwhile, Olivia, who plays Ashley, did a lot of her own stunts.
Yeah, that's great.
She's terrified of spiders, and they didn't have enough money to make CGI spiders. She came up with it. She was like, well, if we can, why don't we just use real ones? And the director's like, holy fucking shit. What?
Yeah.
You're like terrified.
One of my favorite movies just shoots bugs and maggots all over a woman's face. So, I mean, like, I gotta say that.
Jesus Christ.
You guys ever see The Gates of Hell? Yeah. I mean,
that one.
I'm going to make you guys watch it. There's Lucio Fulci. She opens a curtain and just maggots and disgusting shit just spray all over her face for like a minute. It's so gross. It's like thousands of maggots.
Okay. Well, so, anyway, I'm curious. I'm not going to say my opinion yet, but I'm curious. I know this movie is very blatantly talking about toxic masculinity. So it very much focuses on the male characters. It's obviously from Luke's point of view, the male character's point of view. It's interesting because it is a movie, it's a sexual assault movie, but it's not from the point of view of the victim, I would argue.
I disagree. I think it's a shared perspective. I mean, it is largely from his perspective, but you also are very much on her side, and you definitely see her perspective a lot. She's tied up, so there's not a lot she can do, but she makes a lot of use of her situation. She is not a dumb protagonist at all. She is fucking smart as shit and really resourceful. And even when she's tied to a chair, she figures out how to, like... She fucking hides a bloodstream from him. Like, how did she do that? She's great.
Yeah, I mean, the actions were cool, but I don't like how her character was written. I don't think it's a strong female character. I don't think they really give her a lot to do. Like, yeah, maybe like her trying to get away, but I think that's just what any character would do in that situation. She doesn't change. She doesn't learn. She's incredibly weak throughout the entire film. Like,
No.
and in the beginning, and my other thing about the point of view too is like, in the beginning, I actually like started wondering, wait, is she like going to let this kid think that he can have a crush on her? She's like almost flirting with him.
Well, I mean, having had babysitters in the past, they used to do that shit with my brother. It's very common for older women to flirt with young boys. Super
but
common.
we don't give her a reason to. Like, why would she be doing that?
I mean, I get it, but you know, it's slightly inappropriate, but societally, especially outside of the US, it is extremely common.
But why would the character
it's a very
in the
recent
movie
that it's kind of like taboo here?
Sure.
Yeah.
But why
So,
would where's
no,
the reasoning of
She-
the character in the film to do this? There's no
First
characterization.
off, she
David.
doesn't understand. Like, I'm sure she knows she has a little bit of a crush on her, but I don't think that she realizes how actual and how much she is willing to go through with it.
Oh,
She's
totally.
more just like a babysitter saying, like, oh yeah, you're cute. Like, just giving him confidence, helping him so he'll be able to talk to girls. She doesn't think he's actually going to make a move on her.
Yeah.
Subduing to a 12-year-old boy's like what he wants. He tries to kiss her and she still lets him put his head on her shoulder. Like, what?
While they're trying to get killed, you mean? I mean, while they're
No.
being threatened to
Before-
get killed?
No, he tries to kill her during the whole beginning. He tries to kiss her, and then
Yeah. And then immediately
she's like,
the intruder
"Oh,
plot takes over.
stop you!" No, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens, and she's like, "Oh, you're so silly, you're so cute, ha ha ha," and like
No.
he
No,
like
that's
cuddles
not
up
what
next to
happens.
her.
That does happen.
She shoves him off of her.
Yeah, well, it's kind of in between. That does happen in the movie, and she strongly rejects him. But then she feels kind of bad because
yes.
she kind of hurt his feelings, so she allows him to put his head on her shoulder. Because to her, there's like this brotherly thing, because she's been babysitting him for at least 4 years. She
Right.
says
And
she's known him since she was 8, so it's been at least 4 years, probably longer.
Right. And it says a lot about like what being a woman is like in this toxic male society, but at the same time, like I don't see her changing by the end. I think this is my biggest issue is like it's not that she becomes stronger mentally or like emotionally, it's just that she survives.
Well,
Like she
does she survive?
There's no arc for her character.
She survives.
Does she? Because it sounds like the kid's going to the hospital. Does she survive?
Well, there should have been a sequel called Better Not Cry, in which the kid follows her to the hospital a la Halloween 2, but we didn't get
that's
that,
great.
and now the kids are too old.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Which
that would have
sucks,
been great.
because that would have been amazing. And then Patrick Warburton and Virginia Madsen would have had a bigger role too. Like, I'm very disappointed that we did not get that sequel in the hospital. We should have.
Mm-hmm. Well, the actual sequel is Funny Games, and that's just the kid growing up.
I think the big difference between this movie and Funny Games, though, is that the killers in Funny Games don't have a motivation, at least not toward like specifically geared towards their victims, whereas this one is all about his relationship with the victim. And he's obviously what's the right phrase here, David? You looked more up into this.
Conduct disorder. So it wouldn't actually be called psychopathy for a child, because psychopathy is something that you have to develop, so it would only be it's a term that would only actually apply to an adult. But he would be considered at very high risk of developing psychopathy. I actually did the psychopath test as both Patrick Bateman and this kid, and got that both of them are in the 99th percentile of psychopath.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas
But
I
it's-
am only in the 5th percentile.
Yeah. Oh, the 5th? Oh, I got like 20. I was pretty low.
Yeah.
What did you get?
Where did you
take
get,
it, Devin?
I got 97.
No, you didn't. Really?
Yeah, I don't know
Holy
why.
Well, then why are you telling us that? If you're a real psychopath, you would just say you're in like the 5th percentile or something.
Well, that's why I'm so confused. I was like answering the questions to everything of like, do you care about other people? I'm like, yeah, totally 100% true. Do you care about other people's feelings? Yes, totally 100% true.
Yeah, but then it was also like, do you steal things from people? Do you take risks? Do you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm like, yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I'm also like, I have a leadership position, so I also like, that's a big question on there too. Come on.
Yeah, it was. So yeah, Devin, you're not allowed over my house. It's obvious. It's just that women are evil.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's just obvious.
As this movie proves, no.
To be clear, psychopathy is not actually more common in men or women. It's very gender neutral.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
interesting.
But it
I'll
manifests
side with
differently
you.
in men and women. Male psychopaths tend to be more prone to violence. They're not always violent. That psychopathy is not always a violence thing. But male psychopaths are more likely to be physically violent, whereas female psychopaths are more likely to be like more bullying, more social violence.
Talk about the patriarchy, man. That's a perfect representation.
Yeah.
So it's very obvious that he has psychopathic tendencies, and they make a point throughout the film to show that he doesn't have remorse, which is a big symptom of this mental disability. But there is one moment where he shows some remorse, and it's when he kills Garrett, which like that scene still gets me every single goddamn time. He has a second where he like actually feels bad about killing his friend. I'm curious your thoughts on that and why they needed to include that in the film.
Disagree with everything you just said.
Really?
No. He feels really bad for killing Garrett.
First off, regarding earlier you mentioned that he has more of a motive than the killers in Funny Games. I don't think he does. I see his motive of wanting to be with Ashley as a complete red herring. He is literally planning on killing her the entire time. Like he doesn't give a shit about being with Ashley. It's all a red herring to get Garrett to go along with it. He just wants to see if he can get away with this. That's his entire motivation. He just wants to see if he can get away with this.
Still a motivation.
When he kills Garrett and he's like has this breakdown where he's screaming and it's fucking terrifying and oh my god, you hate him so much. I love that scene because psychopaths are not cool and this kid is not cool. I think this actually does a better job than American Psycho at avoiding the hero worship problem because I can't imagine anyone actually wanting to be this kid. But like he's not upset. He's not remorseful for killing Garrett. He is angry and frustrated that he didn't have as much control over Garrett as he thought he did.
Interesting.
He doesn't feel bad about it for a second. He shoots his friend, and then like a minute later, just like, you're starting to annoy me anyway. And just goes on and casually goes to sleep.
Right.
Like, he doesn't give a shit about his friend.
And he does say, look what you made me do.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
I think this idea of psychopathy it's important to point out that it is more of like a spectrum. So this idea that like sociopaths have like no feelings towards people is usually not exactly true. They have some. It's just like muted or diminished in some way. It's also not the best clinical term. It seems like there's a lot of problems with psychopathy tests and analyses in general.
Yeah, there's a lot of disagreement over it. It's not actually in the DSM, but it is still used by scientists.
I also don't think either of these movies are doing a really good, like, accurate depiction of
American Psycho is
psychopathy.
definitely not. American Psycho is like strictly metaphorical. Patrick Bateman, when I took his test estimate, still obviously said that he was highly psychopathic. But he's not. He is a mixture of various stereotypes and tropes associated with psychopathy. He's not a real person. Patrick Bateman is strictly metaphorical. Luke Lerner,
he's a husk, an entity, and he's just a side effect of society.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Luke Lerner is, I think, very realistic and is at least attempting to be a realistic depiction of what a child psychopath to be would act like and would be like. And I think that the movie is very successful in that. And he feels real. I believe that this kid exists.
Which is terrifying.
Yes. It's completely terrifying.
This movie, again, it's not scary. It's done with this fun-loving, like, oh, here's an evil Home Alone vibe.
Well, what's scary about it is that it's real. Is that I believe that this kid exists.
Yeah. I mean, I get that too. And that's why it's interesting. It's like, it's scary in theory and in conversation, but not necessarily in practice.
Yeah, and I mean, just going off of that, I agree that this is a very hyper realistic version, and I feel like that's why they had to add so much comedy to it to make it not terrifying and make people able to watch this movie without wanting to throw up and die.
Well, I don't necessarily agree. I think I think they do that. They do make it a more fun movie. It would be a very different movie if they went in a much more realistic route, and like you'd have to completely change everything though, because there's a lot of slapstick comedy to, you know, a paint can smashing a guy's head.
But it's because I see Luke as more of an honest depiction of psychopathy that I don't see the movie as being as much about the gender roles. Like, he's not actually motivated by sex at all.
Wait, what does that have to do with gender roles being motivated by sex?
All right. So I'm a little confused by his motivation, because it seems like towards the end of the movie, he's telling her, you don't know how much it feels like to be rejected by somebody. And then he's also saying, he has this like Oedipal thing with his mother where he's like, I'm so upset that I'm no longer protected by her. And now I enter into the world and I have to fend for myself and see how much power I can get or something. So I'm a little confused.
So first off, anytime he says anything, take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
Psychopaths lie compulsively. Can't take anything he says at face value. I don't even believe that he has a crush on her. Like,
yeah, I think his goal is ultimately what he gets at the end, which is to be coddled by his mother when she just holds him in her arms and says, my baby, I'm so happy you're all right, don't worry. I think that is his ultimate goal, but it doesn't have to do about sex. Like, mother to son relationship is still a gendered relationship.
Yeah. So I wonder, is it so much about him wanting to be coddled again, or him proving that he can dupe somebody, and his mother being the closest to him literally having come out of her, is like that his expression of complete power, that he can do all these horrible things but still maintain the status of her baby?
Because I don't know, because at the end there's like the mid credits after scene. I don't know if he's trying to get away with it or just protect himself from like still being seen as good in his mother's eyes. I don't know. Get away with it. It can be both.
I think
it can be both.
Yeah,
that he just wants his mother to still see him as good. I mean, that is getting away with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like I said, I think his mother seeing him as good is him expressing his power to the utmost.
Right.
So I think it is all self-serving.
Where his mother finds out what he's been up to.
Then he goes totally off the wall.
Better not cry. Again, that would be a totally different movie, because it's everything in this movie is done with like a tongue-in-cheek kind of humor. You know, it is funny from beginning to end. And is it okay to compare it to American Psycho? Like, which movie do you think is funnier? And there are differences in the type of humor. I feel like American Psycho is this really exaggerated kind of theatrical sense of humor. You know, it's like funny that Patrick Bateman is being this very over-the-top character. And Christian Bale has even said that he wasn't trying to be realistic with this performance. And it's not.
I saw a thing. This was not from a good source. It was just like some random comment, so I don't know if this is true or not. But allegedly, Christian Bale based his performance off of Tom Cruise, who he saw on a talk show, and he was just like so taken by how empty Tom Cruise felt that he was like, "That I'm gonna base my performance off of that now."
So sad.
Yeah. I wonder if
and he does it so well.
True.
I do too. I hope
it's true.
That's pretty funny.
I enjoy American Psycho as a comedy, but it's because that's my taste. I like the satirical dark comedy. It's my number one type of film. I'm not going to hide this. I hate Better Watch Out. So I was so angry throughout watching it that I couldn't laugh. So I don't find it. I respect the high level of comedy that they're trying to do. And there's some one-liners in there that are really great, but I was too angry throughout the film to like really laugh at it or find it funny.
I would disagree that it's high level comedy. I think a lot of it's like slapstick silliness.
I meant like high energy
Oh,
comedy.
high energy, definitely. Yeah. Like when she's running away and the carolers are there and then she slips and falls. That's just funny, but it's like snickering funny. Like, oh, the humor is very in the vein of Home Alone.
Yeah.
I don't think that Better Watch Out is that funny. the main humor of it comes from the fact that it's shot like a Hallmark movie.
Well, yeah.
And it looks like a Hallmark movie, and it's playing off of those tropes and saying, oh, but actually this is what life is really like. It is not this colorful, white fence, cherry-painted world that you are seeing it as around this Christmas time. It's dark and fucked up, and people are cruel. It's hard to find a lot of what Luke does funny because he is so evil. Like,
Yeah.
he is so deranged, and American Psycho might be funnier just because it's easier to sympathize with Patrick Bateman than it is to sympathize with Luke.
I definitely can't see it more easier to sympathize with Patrick Bateman because Luke's character is sympathetic pretty much until he starts calling the first ex-boyfriend. Then you're like, oh, this is a kid who's over his head. He's doing all this crazy shit. And in the back of your mind, you're like, wow, he's doing some really fucked up things. But you're like, you get where the mentality's coming from. Like, these are kids who are going too far. They're pushing the button. But then you're like, oh, he's actually an evil mastermind. Like, now
I stopped sympathizing him as soon as it got into rapey territory. I was like, okay.
When he touched her boobies?
You mean in the first 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I actually stopped sympathizing with him before we found out he was evil because I thought he was a bratty kid who I hated.
Yeah.
To me, he just seemed like a 12-year-old kid. And I was like, that's funny. He's like a 12-year-old kid who thinks he can cop a feel on his babysitter. That's like such a trope. It's so true. I mean, having a brother and just knowing kids. That's what kids do.
Right. And I do like how they write his and Garrett's dialogue, too. I feel like it's very realistic of a 12-year-old. And, we're not going to sugarcoat this. Y'all think about sex a lot. And I do love when they talk about Adventure Time and Marry, Fuck, Kill Adventure Time characters. Because I'm like, that's great, probably exactly what fucking people talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely
It's actually, it's not quite as dirty as I feel like 12-year-olds actually were. And it is pretty good. Considering the type of movie it is, I think it's done well.
The reason that I say Patrick Bateman is sympathetic, I mean, the scene that makes me hate him the most is when he kills the homeless man and his dog. That's just terrible, and I fucking hate him in that scene. But then, he does show remorse. He does show, I wish I could control this. And he even stops himself from killing sometimes. There's a scene with his secretary where his girlfriend, Reese Witherspoon, calls him just as he's about to kill the secretary, and then he stops, and he doesn't kill her.
That's a really funny scene, actually, when he's standing behind her with the nail gun, and then he gets the call from... Well, if it was in a different context, it would be an extremely funny scene that you're trying to make it with your secretary, and she asks you if you're single, and you go, yeah, pretty much, and then your girlfriend calls right then on the answering machine. It's pretty funny. But I read that scene as that actually happened. So, in the viewing, if you don't think he killed anybody, then this is him suppressing it and almost killing his secretary. I also think he just doesn't kill anyone in the movie, so him thinking about it is
that's obviously going to color your interpretation of the scene, and this scene might even support you in that because it really doesn't make sense that he doesn't kill her. It doesn't fit his character. It's kind of a dumb scene.
Well, no, I mean, not exactly, because he's smart in covering his tracks. So if he killed his secretary, he'd probably get caught. You can look at it that way. When he kills Paul Allen, he has an alibi, and he makes it set up so it looks like he's somewhere else. The other characters he kills are street women who, historically are easier to get away with murdering than other people of different sections of society.
Which, by the way, psychopaths are also, really impulsive, and there is a big trope that the psychopath would be, the Lex Luthor kind of, where he can just get away with anything. But actually, a lot of psychopaths are really bad at getting away with stuff because they don't think through the consequences of their actions, which is another thing that I think Better Watch Out gets right. At the end of the movie, it's set up really early on that his mother uses this pencil on the doorknob to find out if he left the room or not. So as the final step of his plan, he just has to get the pencil back before he shuts the door. And he thinks he can do that. And apparently he never bothered to test out if he could do this or not. And he finds out as she's pulling up in the driveway that he isn't able to get around this one thing. And
no, that's such a good point.
I love that scene so much. Wow, you seriously, you didn't have a plan for this. Yeah. Your mother's stupid pencil trick is what's gonna get you caught.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. That whole entire sequence is an interesting elongated scene where the audience is really conflicted because we're watching this kid almost get away with something, and it's like this rush of like, are we rooting for him to get away with it, or are we rooting for these people to find him? It's a curious choice and direction, I think.
I'm rooting for them to find him.
I was rooting for him to get away with it. I thought that would be an interesting ending.
See?
Yeah, not because I liked his character. I mean, I didn't think he was a good guy, but I liked the character.
Yeah.
Same with like Patrick Bateman. You like kind of hope he gets away with it. I think both movies do a really good job of like talking to the impulse control of these types of characters, because Bateman, the whole plot, if you think that he's not killing people but wants to, is about him having trouble with his impulses. Like the entire thing is like all these suppressed emotions, dealing with this very superficial society. He's having trouble, and it causes this internal turmoil, whether it's through closet homosexuality or just lack of human empathy or whatever. And then obviously in Better Watch Out, he does things that he shouldn't do. All right, guys, we're getting close. So this is my favorite part of the show, our bone review section, where we rate each film on a 1 through 4 bone rating system with half bones in between. Starting us off this week is Devin Shepard.
All right, so we're going to do American Psycho first. I love this movie. Every time I watch it, I find new reasons to love it. It's so smart. It's so well done. The performances are insane. It's crazy to me to think that this was very close to not having Christian Bale in it at all. It's literally a perfect role for him. Everyone else does wonderful. Mary Harron's directing is beautiful. Guinevere Turner's writing is awesome. I love them as a partnership. Especially love Guinevere Turner's cameo as Elizabeth during the second threesome scene. Fantastic. And I think says so much about the film. I want to give a big middle finger up to Bret Easton Ellis, who does not like this movie. I think it's great. I think it's a great societal commentary. I think it's really smart comedy. I think it does it in a very tight way where it's not too over the top. And I'm going to give it 3.5 bones.
Nice.
Love this movie. Love it. I think that might be one of the highest ratings I've given.
It's up there.
Yeah. Better Watch Out, I feel exactly the opposite. I hate this goddamn movie so much. I was really hoping the second time around watching it, I was going to understand why others like it and why so many people are cheering this movie on and want to watch it every single year. I hate it. Yeah, it talks about a lot of things that we should talk about, but I don't think it does it in a good way. I really hate how the female characters are written. I respect the direction. I like what David pointed out earlier, that the comedy comes from it looking like a Hallmark movie. I thought, there were some really, really good moments in there. The acting is really superb. I mean, the child actors are phenomenal, and we keep covering such amazing movies with child actors on this podcast. But I really can't like it. It sends me to a place that makes me really upset because I get so angry about just how they view the world. So I'm gonna give it 1.5 bones.
That's higher than I thought you were gonna give it.
Yeah,
same,
I was
actually.
probably 1 bone, but when counting up, the things that I do respect about it, I'm gonna give it a little bit higher.
Okay.
Anyway, Rob, what about you?
Okay, so I guess we'll start with American Psycho 2. I also love this movie. I've seen it maybe 4 or 5 times. Patrick Bateman has become a horror icon, and it's hard to dispute. There's a lot of good reasons for it. I find the comedy spot on. I find the political commentary and societal commentary more insightful each time I watch it. The kills are good, even though most of them are off screen. The performances are fantastic. Reese Witherspoon back and forth with Christian Bale is fantastic. And yeah, I think it's near perfect. Maybe towards the end I usually get a little tired, but that could just be me with every movie. I'm going to give it 3.5 bones. I think if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. There's a reason why Patrick Bateman is on all the collections of horror icon posters. He's in all of them for a good reason. As for Better Watch Out, I did kind of like it. Yeah, I wasn't blown away. The twist definitely got me, though. And I do have to give it credit for that. And I think the movie gets a lot more interesting as it goes on. It's very silly. It doesn't exactly make sense. And it's not bloody at all, which is too bad. I would have liked it if there was a lot more shock value, if it went from this Hallmark to like Dead or Alive territory, where it just got like hyper violent. And I think that would have really changed my viewing of it. Plus, I just like hyper violence. So I'm gonna say it's okay. I'm on the fence if it's okay or good. So I'm gonna lean towards good because the twist was so effective. So it gets 2.5 bones for me.
So I'll also start with American Psycho. So I really like American Psycho as well. I think it is great. I love Christian Bale's performance in it. There are a lot of amazing scenes and brilliant one-liners, and it's a very fun movie. I don't like it as much as you guys. I do think it's a little bit cold, and I really do agree with Mary Harron. I think it's a significant issue that the ending doesn't work with the ambiguity, because I don't like the idea that it's all in his head. I think that's extremely boring, and it's a lot more interesting if it's not. And I wish that had been more clear and more apparent in the movie, that it could actually totally be happening. I love the themes. I love the way it's shot. Mary Harron's direction is beautiful, or not beautiful when it doesn't want to be. I love how clean everything is. I love the shot of his reflection in a Les Mis poster, which is just so great and ironic. I'm just gonna give it 2.5 bones, because I do have those issues with it, but I still really like it. It's not something I'm gonna rewatch constantly. Better Watch Out, I think, takes not all the same themes, but a lot of them, and does them much more effectively. I like that it's real. I like that it's not strictly a metaphor, that this kid is a real fucking person, and it is scary to think that people are capable of this, but they are. And it's scary to see that this can exist within a child, because of course it can. Psychopaths were kids at some point. And I love how it bounces off the Hallmark vibe. I'm giving this one 3 bones. I like Better Watch Out better than American Psycho. I think it's a better movie. I actually liked it more on my rewatch than I did the first time, because the first time I was really bored for the first half hour, and this time I wasn't, because I knew it was coming.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm giving it 3 bones.
So, all right, that's it for this week, guys. You heard our reviews, our analysis. Let us know if you agree or if you disagree in the comments on our social media accounts. Again, you can find us on Cadaver Dogs Pod. That's Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Shoot us an email at cadaverdogspod@gmail.com if you want us to review some of the movies of your choosing. Until next time, killer kittens and horror hounds, signing out.
I'm going to return some videotapes.